guys? This is Apurva, bringing back another amazing guest to talk about kind of all things real estate. Different perspective today. My man Laji James is here. We're going to talk the perspective of a limited partner, an LP, and kind of what he looks for when he's investing. And his track record is amazing. I'm not going to take away his steam. We're going to start talking about his journey. But 3,000 doors is the current number in terms of LP investments. So 3,000, all multifamily?
We have some single family investments.
Got it.
But most of them are multifamily for sure.
So residential, basically.
Residential throughout Texas. We have Fort Worth, Dallas, Houston, suburbs of Houston, Florida, Orlando, Jacksonville.
So I'm like, all right. So I want to know the journey from 0 to 3,000 and how we got there. But let's back up for a second. Let's just start with, give us your background, yourself, Dr. James. Explain, just tell me the life story.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Laji James. I was born in India I always say I was born in the jungle in Kerala, because we were very rural. We weren't in a city. And then we came over to the United States in the 70s. Mom was a nurse. And then we kind of moved around a little bit. We lived in Detroit. My parents thought I had a respiratory disease because I was sick all the time. We moved to Houston, and I was never sick again because I needed heat and humidity.
Detroit, man.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
And then, I went to school in Houston. I ended up going to dental school in San Antonio, then specialized in pediatric dentistry. I'm a pediatric dentist in Houston, in West Houston. We specialize in children and teens and children with special health care needs.
That's awesome.
And then as we were going through it, my financial advisor, after the big downturn in 2008, my financial advisor was talking to me. He's like, hey, you should go buy some houses. And I said, why? And he goes, because houses are 50 cents on the dollar. And I said, what do you want me to do with these houses? We had seen the TV shows kind of like Flip My House. And I was like, do you want me to fix them and flip them? He's like, no, you buy the houses. They're cheap right now. You rent them and we hold on to them. And then we decide do we want to get rid of them or not. And I said, we don't know how to do any of that. He goes, oh, I'll teach you how to do it. And so I said, well, I don't have time for it. I have a full-time job practice that's building, young kids, no way I can do that. He goes, yes, you can, and get your wife involved. And so I asked my wife, and my wife said, no way. She goes, I'll help you pick out a house, but I'm not going to manage it. We're not dealing with tenants and toilets and phone calls in the middle of the night. And what he taught us pretty much is, no, purchase this house, fix it up so they don't call you, so there's nothing wrong with it. Give them a nice place to live. And then also, he kind of, in our lease, we kind of included some things where if there was a problem with the house, they were going to pay the first $75 of whatever the repairs were. So it wasn't like they were calling you all the time. Yeah, the tenant had to pay a certain amount, and so they had skin in the game of keeping the property in reasonable working order. And so it worked out where we didn't have that many calls. Now, it did help. My wife she is a HR manager, and so she has a lot of experience in screening. And so it wasn't like the first person who applied, like, hey, we need to get somebody in here.
Right.
She actually made sure that the tenants that applied were qualified. She did checks on them, credit checks, background checks, to make sure that they were reasonable tenants. And so sometimes we would hold on to a property for a little bit to make sure we had the right tenant in. Because there's lots of people who qualify for income, or they say they qualify for income. They may or may not.
Right.
And so she would make sure they did. And so we didn't have so many tenant issues. That's not to say we never had any tenant issues.
Sure.
She's been at the eviction court before, but it wasn't enough to dissuade us. So we had a mentor that helped us with that. And then for a while, especially during that downturn between 2009 to, I would say, up to 2012, houses were cheap. And so we just kept buying houses because it seemed like it wasn't that difficult, but we did have somebody holding our hand the whole time. Now, we did think about getting a real estate license. My wife was like, okay, I don't really know much about real estate. Let's get this license. And the mentor was like, you can get it if you want to, but if you're not selling homes, you don't necessarily have to. And so we did it without all the education that some people think is a barrier to entry. And we were able to do it successfully. I can tell you, even on our first deal, the first deal was a house that was built in 1999. We bought it on foreclosure. We bought it for $99,000.
Wow.
And that house currently is appraised at $300,000.
That's awesome.
And so And
Love
so,
it.
yeah, so it
I
was
love it.
fantastic.
I love it. So I'm going to unpack a few of those things. One, I need your financial advisor because that guy's clearly a genius and knew exactly what to do at the right time. But, it was impeccable timing, right? Nobody anticipated, we're going to talk a little bit about the market today, but like it kind of feels like there's a version of this coming, right? And so, a lot of people don't want to expose themselves, don't want to risk it. And so I think I want to talk a little bit about kind of your risk appetite as we go, but like, walk me through kind of where we got from one unit at a time, and then like when did you get introduced to limited partners and just being a limited investor and things like that? Give me a little bit insight of that.
So there's two parts to it. One, we did want to invest in real estate because everything we read online or read in books was if you wanted to kind of accumulate some wealth, real estate had to be part of your portfolio. Everybody who had some wealth in the United States seemed to have real estate. So we wanted to get involved, and single family homes were simple because we knew single family homes.
Yep, you started there.
We started there, and my wife, my wife helped manage them, but because she was working part-time and she was managing them, leasing them, and this is all under the direction of our financial advisor, that qualified her to be a professional real estate investor. The beauty of the professional real estate investor, which I did not realize at the time. So we always hear that real estate provides tax advantages.
Yep.
And it does, but when you are a professional real estate investor, it provides tremendous tax advantages where depreciation, paper losses, even if you're making money on the house, you can deduct against your active income, which will help you with your taxes significantly.
Right.
So once we were doing a certain volume of time that she was doing it, so professional real estate investing has to do with the tax law, and it has to do with the IRS code on it, and so it has to do a time component. So we were doing enough where we qualified for that time component, and as we were building houses, at some point she said, that's enough. Like, it's taking too much of my time, and I don't want to be stressed out about it because I do have to do a certain amount of bookkeeping. I have to follow up with the tenants. I have to show the homes. She's doing everything. In the meantime, she's also running around 2 young kids.
Yeah.
She's also helping me with whatever I say when the office needs stuff, and she's also doing her part-time job as well. And so, I mean, I was
superwoman.
I was asking a tremendous amount of her, but also real estate doesn't consume so much time if you're not doing what we were doing. We were doing a lot. And so at some point she said, that's enough, no more of this. And so then I said, okay, what do I do? We're done with this. And so I started researching, and doing the researching at the time, multifamily properties, and at the time I didn't even know exactly what multifamily meant. Was it a duplex? Was it a fourplex? Was it a fancy apartment complex down the street? But I found that multifamily properties were very stable. They all provided cash flow from a rent standpoint, and that they also appreciated in value. But the major thing is you could force appreciation. Whereas your house is you can make your house nicer, but still you're not gonna sell your house for tremendously more than the neighbor sells the house. But apartment complexes, you could go in, you could change up the entire apartment complex, raise the rents, and depending on a combination of how much people were paying in rent, how many people were living there, the appraised value of the complex would go up significantly. So you could force this big appreciation in a short amount of time, sometimes even in 3 years, 5 years, those kind of things. And so when I looked at it and I did my research, it seemed to be a great real estate asset class that I could get into actually passively. So when we, as busy professionals, we always talk about active versus passive investments, so we always want passive money. But what I found out about any kind of investing is nothing is truly passive. Like, you have to do something to get a good quality investment. And so multifamily units or investing in apartment complexes seem to be an excellent way to passively invest.
So you fell in love with the asset class.
Fell in love with the asset class
first.
Research,
which, you were not alone. There's a lot of people in the multifamily space. How did you identify your first opportunity as an LP?
So
let's talk about that a little bit.
As I looked into it, as I did more research, the question was, do you invest in the property or do you invest in the sponsorship team? So all of these properties have some type of sponsorship team where you have a general partner. And so the general partner or several general partners actually do the management, the acquisition of everything in the property, and limited partners provide the capital alongside the general partners to purchase this property. most of this property is financed by the bank. And so usually it's like a 70-30 type of situation where 70% is a loan and 30% is the capital. And so the LPs and the GPs provide the capital for the down payment of the loan and for different things that the property needs. Maybe it needs improvements, closing costs, working capital, reserves, those kind of things go into the equity that you need to raise.
Yep.
And so at first I was like, well, do I find the best property making the best numbers, or do I focus on the people doing it? And I found it was a combination, but definitely you lean harder on the sponsorship team. So what I learned is look for people who have a track record.
Okay.
Look for people, for me personally, because I need to know that person, somebody who's friendly, who will sit down and talk to me,
Yep.
who will reach out to me. If I text them a question about how to do this, they're educating me.
Yep.
And then honestly, I did a little bit of Facebook stalking. I made sure if I didn't know somebody, I knew somebody who
connections.
did know
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And so for me, it had to be a personal component. I had to know the team personally through some friend or some introduction where I shook their hand, talked to them, and I could communicate with them to see how responsive they were to both my needs and to whatever questions came up.
Love that. So GP-LP relationships are critical, right? And you know, the shaking hands, eye to eye, face to face is always going to be a critical component. So walk me through like the very basics, the very first one. Like, did you Google around? What, like, where did you find that first great sponsor or great team or great opportunity?
So the first one, I was the most nervous about, just
course,
like everything
yeah,
else.
absolutely.
Like the first date, the
Yeah.
first whatever, you're gonna be the most nervous about. So I actually I went to one of these big meetups that had a lot of
Okay,
different
like a local
sponsors. Yeah, local real estate
networking
club.
thing. Great.
And so I just kind of looked to see who all was there and who all had opportunities to invest. And then as I went through them, I was terrible. Like in hindsight, I was the worst. I was like the nerdy kid at the thing, because I was like,
great.
so have you won any awards? Like, and so I literally
So have you won any
walked
awards?
around. Yeah, have you won any awards from
Are
the
you
Houston
40
department?
under 40?
Yeah,
Like, that's
yeah.
hilarious.
Are you from Houston? Have you grown up in Houston? Have you won any awards with the Houston Apartment Association, with the National Apartment Association, with the Texas Apartment? I mean, are you recognized? What's your track history? And I found one guy did all of that. Grew up
found
in
him.
Houston.
That's hilarious.
He had other properties. He had won awards for like single owner who had just turned around properties. He was super friendly. He was involved in his church. And so that was the first guy I invested with.
Okay.
And everything went well, good communication, good meetups. And that was the first one. Once I got through the first one, and really, I blew a lot of capital I was saving up for this.
So let me, if you don't mind, I'm going to pry a little bit because it was your first deal. So I imagine it wasn't too huge yet, right? But like, what is the ticket size? What was that first investment?
And so this particular investment, the ticket size at that time was a minimum of like $50,000.
Yep.
But really, they wanted $200,000 each. And so a $200,000 for a new investor was
that's big.
Yeah, it was big.
Chunk,
it was going to be too much, and so they preferred that. So they were going to give preference to as many people who gave that first.
A large one, yeah.
And so, but this was a very large property. It was like 360 something units. So it was a very big purchase price. So luckily, I said, hey, I'm new at this. I can't put all my and same financial advisor told me, do not put all your capital with this guy. You don't know this guy. I know he's one of
He strikes
deals,
again.
but,
I love this guy.
But please diversify. You're new to this asset class. Go with the smaller amount that you're okay to, And he said you're okay to lose, but he said you're not going to lose it because you still own the building, right? Like these asset classes are nice because the question isn't, are you going to lose my money? It's more, how much money are you actually going to make? What I found in the last several years is they all make money. And so, which is nice for the ones that I've been associated with. Yeah. It's just how much money you can make. Some make 15%, some make 17%, some make 20%.
Right.
Some made even more than that.
Right.
And so it's kind of like, as you do it, you're like, if somebody told you, hey, I'm going to guarantee you, 10% money, you'd be like, oh, that sounds great. Unless all the time before you were making 30%, and you're like, well, I could do 30%.
You bring up a good point. So it feels like there's so many opportunities. And there's so many GPs kind of either propping up and new. And so like, I want to kind of shift into like the underwriting, right? So how are you vetting these teams? What's your kind of gut check? And then ultimately like, if you had 50 opportunities and just like you said, one maybe 10 may, one may, and in my opinion, you don't really know until the end, right? Because everybody can project, but reality is once the deal's done and you're kind of getting paid back out, what did you really end up making, right? What does your analysis process look like, you know?
Right, so I had the same thing. At first I thought, okay, let's go through these people, but it was difficult to find everything I was initially looking for in that first sponsor.
Tight box.
It was a very small box that not very many people fit, and I realized, okay, I'm being a little unreasonable. I was lucky to get into that deal because he actually had a lot of people in that deal. And so as I kind of broadened it, I realized that as I was looking at more deals, and the way we look at deals is something called a private placement memorandum.
Yep.
And so they give you a document that kind of goes through the deal. I realized that a lot of these deals look very similar, you know, even based on different locations, and they're all kind of doing the same thing. So then I realized that anybody can make these, you know, you can use a template, you know, PowerPoint, Excel to make these. And so how much should I believe that this is going to happen? Exactly what you're saying. And so I shifted from the bones of the deal. I still looked at the bones of the deal because it had to fall within certain parameters. Like, you know, you don't want it to be too expensive, or you don't want it to be in certain areas, those kind of things. And we can get into that. But what I was mainly looking for is the sponsors. Do they have a track record? Do they seem approachable? Have they done other deals? Have they gone full cycle? What have their other deals done? And so I still stuck with that. I didn't go with brand new ones. Like, even say I'm doing a deal right now, I'm the most junior person on this deal. So I really don't have a huge track record other than I've been in the space for like 11 years. But I'm partnered up with lead sponsors who have done this forever.
Great track record.
One of the guys, I mean, he's got literally like, let me tell you, he's got 1.2 billion in various assets with, I would say, what does he have? Like $50 million, or no, 800 million in just the Houston area.
Wow.
And so these are guys who forgot more about things than I know.
That we've got yet to learn, right? So actually, you brought up a good point. So like, when you're vetting GPs, you know, there may be some that have not actually gone full cycle and returned the capital, even though they've put out a lot of deals, right? Because, you know, an average, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but like 3 to 5 years typical horizon for a deal, right? And if they're early, they may have deployed a lot and they got a lot of action and it looks good at the top line, right? But like, okay, what is the return? What are the outcomes, et cetera, et cetera? So that, I mean, I think that's a kind of a good nugget there. Like, okay, let's look at like the exits, right? What do they really land on? You know, do you vet other LPs that have been in previous deals? Is that part of your vetting process? Like,
Usually I will ask, you know, people who've,
it's like the reference check.
Yeah, I'll say, hey, who have you invested in that has done well?
Okay.
Is that somebody I should do? And they'll say, oh, I'll send you their thing, or I'll get on a distribution list. And so I will ask people, once I've met them that are in the space, say, hey, who's been a good, you know, general partner that you've seen in these deals? And so I have met people that way as well.
Love that. I'm assuming in the medical community, a lot of, you know, every doctor I've met, you know, worked so hard to become a doctor, and then they work so hard to not be a doctor anymore, right? And it's like, seems like the journey, right? Like you 8 years, 16 years, 12 years, whatever it takes, and then you work so hard, you know, you're blessed with a lot of income, right, that you can put out, and then, you know, retirement plan kicks in, at least that's what I've seen. And so that's translated into is I see a lot of, you know, very intelligent medical professionals that are kind of taking their brain cells and looking at real estate investing, other types of investing for sure, but obviously a lot of concentration around real estate. So kind of on that note, I wanted to shift into, you're now converting yourself to a general partner, right? You know, sizable track record as an LP, now you've got some deals, right? Or your first deal, right? Walk us through that. What is the mindset, shifting gears? What is the end goal? Where are we going with this, right? Are you chasing some of these big numbers like some of these guys have? You know, are you ready to retire? What's happening?
So it's funny. We have an apartment complex deal that's going on right now, and we're raising capital for it. So I sent the information to one of my friends, and he was asking a lot of questions, and he realized that, hey, this guy knows a lot. I didn't realize he knew so much about this space. And he goes, so is this all you're doing now? Are you done practicing dentistry?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, this is just the first step. So in terms of what we're planning on doing from retiring and all that kind of stuff. No.
Still far down
The
the
problem with doctors, dentists even, is we've learned to, you think we're entrepreneurs, right?
Yep.
But we haven't built a business, most of us. What we've done is built a nice job for ourselves.
Right.
Like if we're not there, it's
Yep.
like Warren Buffett says, if you're not making money while you sleep, you're not making money.
You're not making money.
And so I'm not making any money while I sleep
it.
unless it was in real
It
estate.
requires your labor,
Correct.
right? You're still dependent on your labor. You have to show up to earn the paycheck, right?
Yep.
Which most people do, right? But I'm with you.
Most people do, but I also enjoy it. I enjoy the relationships I have with these patients. I still want to be there, but I still also want to make money while I sleep. And so we're doing this LP stuff, and my wife loved it because she went from, hey, I'm
Active
managing
management.
this, to now we're just getting, we call mailbox money. I mean, it's
Yeah.
direct deposited, but she
Absolutely.
didn't have to do anything. She's like, I love this LP thing.
Right.
And so for certain people, that's all they need. They put the money in and they get monthly
I bet you
distributions.
could argue that the return you're making versus the cash flow on the single families is probably comparable or close, right? If it's the right sponsor with the right deal with the right return, you know what I mean? Versus like, okay, I'm clipping $200 a month in net profit on a single family rental, right? I bet you there's kind of a, if you really looked back at it, unpacked it, versus all the management and all the headache that you had to do, just latch onto a great sponsor, a great deal, and you're making a very similar return potentially, right? So
For busy professionals, 100% you're correct. But if you do want the tax savings
Yeah, right.
and the appreciation, then there's a whole lot of money to both be earned on appreciation and saved on taxes, but only if you're a professional real estate investor.
So
if
let's
you're,
talk about that first. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What are some misconceptions that LPs may have, right? The tax advantages, things like that. I mean, you know this to a science at this point. What can they expect? What do they maybe have misunderstandings about, like depreciation, et cetera, et cetera. Like, how much of that is really applicable? If let's just hypothetically, I invested $100,000 as an LP, and I don't have active real estate business. I'm just a doctor. I'm writing a $100,000 check. What advantages do I get? What can I expect?
So whenever you get the PPMs or the prospectuses on these, they say definitely a tax advantaged investment. And what they mean by tax advantage is, so you're going to get a certain amount of cash flow, and that cash flow is earned income. Let's say $100,000, you make $7,000 in distributions that year. That $7,000, if you earned it in your job, you would pay 30%,
Right.
whatever,
Tax
to the
rate.
government. But because this is a real estate investment, there is something called depreciation. Your asset is losing money. You can also do something called a cost segregation analysis, where that kind of, you take that depreciation and actually make it more because you're depreciating every little thing in it. And then there are some tax laws that were benefiting businesses that were doing real estate that added a bonus depreciation where you could take it all in the first year. So what happened is, on paper, you would get this piece of paper saying, hey, you earned $7,000, called a K1, but it would also show you lost maybe $80,000.
Yep.
And so when they're telling you this, they're like, hey, you're not going to have to pay any taxes on this earned income. So it's actually better than anything else you can do, because usually you have to pay taxes on any income. And that is true. But the way that works, it's called a passive loss. So you don't actually have lost any money, but because the apartment complex is losing value because the water
Wear and tear
heater
and all that
is
stuff.
wearing down, the roof is wearing
Yep.
down, it looks like you're losing money, and you can apply it to that. But there's rules about it. So you can't use the whole $80,000. You can only use the passive loss for other passive losses in similar real estate stuff. So you can definitely use it for this particular distribution associated with that. And then if you have other properties that are also spilling out passive cash flow, you can use it to that. But it still is great because it doesn't disappear that year. You can carry it forward and you can use it in other years. But this is how I explain it to people. Like versus like. So it's got to be, if you want to use those losses, it's got to be on gains that you made, or passive income you made in similar kind of
So
asset
passive
classes.
to passive, active to active.
Correct.
Right? That's
And
the simple way,
yeah.
I guess, to think about it.
I think initially my main problem was I thought once I was a limited partner, I would be able to take all the losses.
I think that's the misconception most
Yes.
people have, right?
And you can't.
And I think it's a responsible GP to make sure that it's clearly understood kind of what the real benefit at the end of the day would be to the LP, but also, like, as an LP, know what you're signing up for, right? And make sure your expectations are in line. Let's talk about the current market. what are you seeing? You know, what are your other GPs seeing? You got active deals, 3,000 doors, lots of action. What are you thinking? What are you seeing with this current economy and all this stuff going on, inflation?
So we're seeing, in the real estate space, you're seeing a couple things, but in the general space, you're seeing uncertainty. Uncertainty leads to fear, right? We don't know what's going to happen. We know that interest rates are going up. We know that inflation is high. We know costs of goods and services are high. We know there's a supply chain shortage. So you have all these things that are making people think there's going to be some type of crash.
Correct.
And what we're seeing with increased interest rates, what you're seeing both with houses and with commercial properties, is that you're not seeing a huge drop in prices if you look. What you're seeing is maybe things are staying in the market a little longer. So what you're having is less buyers vying for the same property, which is helpful because you're not getting properties that within 6 hours are going for $100,000 over. Multiple. So you're seeing a little bit of slowdown in the market, but you're not seeing price drop. And the main reason I feel that you're not seeing price drop is you don't have a lot of new supply coming into the market, both from construction costs are high, supply costs are high, labor is hard to get, and so you're not seeing anything. Like say this new construction we're doing, I tell people, hey, it's 97% occupied. The other properties in the area are 100% occupied, but there's no new property scheduled to be built for 3 years. 3 years when everything is at 100% occupancy, that's crazy.
That's crazy, yeah.
And so
just can't keep up.
And so right now, people are scared, but we're not seeing any big changes. But I think over the course of the year, there will be more things that you can buy, but I don't see a tremendous price drop. I think there'll be more fair prices. Instead of people paying way over, they're paying at appraised value.
Right. And I think, nobody can predict the future. However, in 2008, 2009, there was a real broken mortgage system that were putting people into bad loans, which extrapolated in turn. We all know the history, but the opportunities for somebody like yourself was right at the end of that, right? Or right within it. And so the fear is kind of slowing some things down, even though I think the underlying economic systems are still intact, at least as far as we know, right? And so this time feels not as extreme. I think a lot of it's just like you said, kind of fear driven, but we'll see what happens. It's good insight though. But you guys are charging ahead.
Yes, we're charging ahead. We actually were able to get this property under the appraised value, so we feel good about it. And with rising interest rates, this is something I didn't know. We have, the loan was actually an interest-only loan, which is great because then you've got a lower cost, because our plan is to sell the property in 3 to 5 years. But because we knew, the lender knew, that interest rates were going to go up. There's no doubt it's going to go up. And there's a chance it could go up, upwards of 200 basis points. It's already gone up so much already. And so we were able to purchase something called a cap insurance product. Interest rate cap product, so that if it goes above over what we've projected, that it'll go up, what we've done our modeling on.
So you basically paid against the risk.
We paid against the risk.
Or in the deal.
Yeah, it's part of the deal. And so that if it goes above a certain interest rate, the insurance company will kick in and pay that.
I did not even know that exists.
Yes.
I'm in the mortgage space.
Yes.
So embarrassing. But
no, it's fantastic, so that we can model at, let's say, we have a 200 basis point raise. And so we can model that, hey, this is the highest we'll pay.
Right.
And if we hit past that, this insurance policy will kick in and pay the difference. The investors will not have to pay for it. Nobody else will have to pay for it. And what's even better about those things is when we sell, you can actually sell that policy as well, which becomes very attractive if interest rates
transfers to the new owner.
It's assumable.
Cool.
And so if we sell it, it becomes a very attractive loan instead of a scary loan.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And and that's a newer product that's now that people are becoming aware of it, those prices are going up higher and higher on those products.
Premiums, right?
And especially with this uncertainty in the market. So it's nice that we locked that in earlier.
So walk me through your current deal. Like what's the deal size? How did you source it? That's one thing that, a lot of people, was it on market, off market, all that fun stuff. And then what, the mechanics of your raise, it's a 501.
It's 503C.
503C, I'm so sorry.
So 503C just means that we can only accept accredited investors. Those are people that have net worth or of around $1 million, or they have a certain amount of income, like
Right.
$200,000-$300,000 worth of income over the last couple of years. But this deal, the way we looked at deals, so it's kind of like, what's your criteria for deals? Everybody's different. Some people will go to opportunity zones. Some people will go like lower cost apartment complexes are definitely in, say, a higher
Class
crime
C,
rate.
Class D areas, yeah.
And so what we were looking for is a more recent build, like anything after 1980. This is 1999. We're in Houston when we were looking for the deal because we're a local group, and so we wanted something that had never flooded, and so it never flooded. And honestly, we've seen that the ones with the higher crime have more problems, so we looked for an A-rated crime area. So, and then we also know that families like to live in A-rated school districts. So we found a 1999 apartment complex in an A crime area, which is good, an A-rated school district that had never flooded. And it's right off the freeway, so you always have to look at
access. Yeah.
It's in Tomball, Texas, which is projected to grow.
It's a great town. Yeah.
Projected to grow tremendously over the next 10 years, and there's no new buildings coming up. We're located right next to a school like the Lone Star College, which is a brand new, beautiful school. So
that's awesome.
We were able to. So there was a lot of deals that we didn't even look at because they didn't fall into those categories. But that's this particular sponsorship team, and that's why I like this team. I said, when you're looking to be a GP, what are you looking for in these deals? I mean, I have a friend of mine who bought some very inexpensive properties relatively, but they were in very bad neighborhoods. And he said, in general, yeah, he made money on the deals, but they call him every day about either, he says, they call him every day about blood, flood, or fire. He's like, every day it's either blood.
It's the wrong kind of BFF, man.
or water or fire damage in these properties. And so that's headaches we don't want to deal with.
No, yeah. I mean, you know, I've come full circle even in our strategy. Like, my philosophy now is pride of ownership. So assets that you when you drive by, you know, and you're with the kids in the car, you want to point and say, yeah, mommy and daddy own that, right? Versus like, roll up the windows and lock the doors, like very different mindset, right? And so pride of ownership in the assets that we own, right? Especially, I don't know about your kind of end goal, but like passing it down is something that's part of our objective, right? You build a nice legacy portfolio that can carry on your family's, journey. So that's, which, it's hard to do in the tougher properties, right? And so, yeah, you may see a higher yield, but like how much headache is that yield worth, right? Are you going to lose sleep on it and things like that? So walk me through, so it's Tomball. What's the deal size?
So it's a 262 unit apartment complex.
Okay.
It's nice. It's brick. My wife and I walked the property. Everybody was happy at the pool, those kind of things.
Yep.
We're using a property management company that we use on some other ones, so it should be good.
So the third-party management.
Yeah, third-party management. The local sponsorship team, they've managed a lot of properties before. Even the other co-sponsors have all been GPs in deals. So we're the ones that are the first GPs in it.
And what's the total value of the property?
We're buying the property for $41 million.
Okay.
So it's going to be a little over. It's close to $163,000 a door.
Okay.
The capital raise is $18 million, and then so for the loan we need $12 million. But we also want to have reserves. We want to have working capital. We want to do improvements on the property. So the way we're going to drive rents is we're going to improve the units and then raise the rents. We also have covered parking. We have a cable Wi-Fi package. We have a dog park. I mean, it's
awesome.
a nice price.
Sounds
It's
really nice.
Yeah, it's got a rec center. I mean, it's really nice, and so we're very happy with the property. The only issue that most people have, like when they talk to us, they're like, "Hey, do you feel that you're buying at a top of a market kind of deal, right? And with interest rate risk?" And I said, "Well, the interest rate risk we've managed, and then in terms of the pricing, when we've looked at other similarly priced properties, for the price we locked in at,
it's 130, 140 a door is very reasonable.
Yeah, it's very reasonable,
right?
And this is kind of a B. I say a B plus property in a very good neighborhood. So we're paying.
And your value add will maybe push it to that B plus if it's not quite there. Right?
Absolutely.
So that's what it sounds like. Yeah.
And so those are the specs of the deal. Let's see. Yeah.
And so napkin, I'm just using my napkin math, 35% raise is what you're raising against the debt, or like in terms of capital infusion? What's your loan to value on it?
Yeah, it's going to be 70-30.
Yeah.
And so we're doing a little bit of extra money so that we never have to deal with anything. And so
smart.
If we get all the money ahead of time, if there's any issues coming up, we pull from that. If we don't end up using that,
Yeah.
then we return it to investors.
just-
And so under promise, over deliver. But you never want to do a capital call and those kind of things.
Yeah, because then
And
it
so-
set wrong expectations. Like, hey, I only need 100, and then now I need 120, now I need 130, right? That's a much harder call versus just over raising. Maybe your yield is a little bit lighter based on cash allocated, but you're safe, right?
Yes, so we make exactly what you're saying. So we make conservative projections, especially in the first year or two, just to see how we're doing. But if we're doing well, then we'll return more to the investors. But what we're hoping to see based on conservative, because you can go, this is the worst case scenario, this is the best case scenario, and instead of selling the best case scenario, we'll talk about a middle case scenario.
Right.
And so the middle case scenario presents like a 15% IRR,
Okay.
internal rate of return. Our hold period projected.
Right.
Hold period is 5 years.
Okay.
And so when we say like projected this or hold period 5 years, it's kind of like, well, let's say the market is just fantastic in
Yep.
3 years. If we get a good offer, we'll sell the property
Sell.
there, and that's nice because people can get their money back faster, right?
So I don't know if you remember from some of my other videos, like my philosophy also in life is never sell. Is there a version where you refi, assuming you've added enough value, and keep and hold, or is that kind of not your thesis?
No. That would be the best scenario,
Okay.
where you refi and you keep for a while and you increase value, keep returning money to the investors. We don't want to tell them that. It's because it is a best case scenario, and with the way the interest rates are right now, we
Yeah.
don't know if we're going to have a good refi situation. At the same time, when you talk to lenders, they're like, we don't know what the environment will be in 3 to 5 years. Will there
Absolutely.
be different products out? Will things change? Will the government step in? And so what you're saying is the ideal scenario.
Got it.
And if we did an ideal scenario like that, people would be getting 20% back on their money. They would be making almost well over 2 times their
Right.
initial investment back.
Right.
And so,
Especially if you're able to return all their capital.
correct.
Right?
You
Then
s-
it's
yeah,
infinity.
It's
right?
infinite returns. But I think in this environment, it's a little disingenuous to present that.
No, of course.
Of course, that could happen. And if we could, we would 100%
Well,
do
do you
it.
have LPs that are in one mindset or another?
No, the LPs typically are going to trust the GPs because they know they're not really involved in the deal. So when the LPs are concerned that way, they look at the deal and say, they'll ask that question, hey, would you do that? And I was, of course we'd do that. We'd make the most return that way.
Right.
But we're not going to present that scenario because we don't know how likely it is.
Makes
a more
sense.
likely scenario is if we project out 5 years. We know that anytime there's been a real estate drop, within a few years, it's right back up. Like real estate never goes,
Yeah,
like this.
yeah.
It goes, and then it goes.
Yeah, it's
and
roller
then it
coaster.
goes-
It's a roller coaster.
Yeah.
It's a little bit up and downs, right?
And so especially these kind of commercial properties. And so we know that also from an occupancy standpoint, people will not be able to afford homes in this particular interest rate environment.
Absolutely.
And so,
So
renting,
multifamily is- yeah,
renting is good, and renting in multifamily is good. And so we know we'll make cash flow from the rentals.
So we'll share your information of how people can get in touch, at the end of this, so that way anybody that's interested in participating in this deal or future deals, credit, of course, can get in touch with you. What advice would you have for a newbie? And I think you bring a ton of value as mostly the lens of an LP and now an operator, right? Or both, really. But let's talk about, I'm just, another doctor or another, high earning individual, W-2, and I'm just looking to get exposed to real estate. What's the advice you would have for them?
The advice is 2 things. One, you always want to get educated. You want to know what you're talking about. You want to know what the terms are. And there's lots of books out there. There's podcasts out there. There's video formats like this where you could learn. But also reach out to people who are doing it and ask them questions. Not necessarily because you want to buy into their deals or whatever. Just, what's your story? What did you get into? Why do you like this asset class? How is it returning? So I would say networking. How did I get this GP deal? It's networking. I've known the main GPs for years.
Right.
I've invested in their deals before. I've seen their returns are like 20%.
Yeah.
And so I trusted them, I knew them, and they knew me. Same thing with even getting these apartment complexes. There's only like 4 or 5 brokers in town who do any of these deals. And if you don't know them, if you don't have a good track record with them, they're not going to
Don't get
sell
their
you these
attention.
deals.
Yeah.
And so as a new person, you're not going to be able to do all this stuff. But what you can do is meet people, talk to them, create relationships with them, and then educate yourself through podcasts, through books, different things. But the last thing is, and this is the problem with doctors or a lot of highly educated individuals, is analysis paralysis.
Yep.
They want to know every part of the deal. But in entrepreneurship and business, risk is part of it.
Of course.
And you need to kind of make that leap. But if you have some people, I feel, holding your hand, that's what happened with us. We had people holding our hand that
You've had some
we
great
didn't make
mentors.
we didn't make any big mistakes because they said, oh no, don't do that. We've done that, that's
Absolutely.
a bad idea.
Yeah.
And so I would say by networking, you will find those people to help you. People want to help other people. Just like you're a friend of my brother, and then when I called you about this, you said, you know what, your story's great. This would be great for people to learn about it.
Yeah.
And so it's just those kind of things. But even in the beginning, when I joined the real estate club, they told me the main thing you can do to be successful in this business, they didn't say learn all the stuff. They said make relationships with people. When you make relationships with people, doors will open. And that would be the biggest advice I could say is have relationships with people in the space, talk to them, have coffee with them, pick their brains.
I think that resonates a lot with me because unfortunately I kind of just started investing and had a ton of shiny object syndrome and like would do a single family, then a fix and flip, then a this, then a that, then a that, right? And I kind of narrowed. And so what I love what you've done is you've concentrated in multifamily, right? From the very beginning, you were in the residential rental game, but then you kind of expanded into multifamily. But then now it's like, that's what we're all in. That's what we do, getting better at it, better at underwriting. Now you're sourcing your own deals and you kind of keep leveling up, but in a concentrated space. Like we've now focused on self-storage, right? That's our kind of asset class. We learned so many, to me and my brother-in-law, right? And we invest together. But that's it. That's what we're going to do now. Like I was like, that's what we're going to build it on. We understand it. We understand the business. We understand that I can look at a deal and know the numbers real fast because we bought our second one just a few weeks ago. And so like, I think that's one thing that also, I think when you start kind of just spreading it out, and there's one thing to be said about spreading the risk out, right, and different kind of exposure. And I understand that. But like, if you're really going to be taking it to the next level, get depth in one asset class, right, and really get to know all the mechanics because then you can look at it and analyze faster, right? Versus like, okay, let me learn about industrial today and let me learn about a land deal tomorrow, right? Because there's so many moving parts and everyone's so different, right? But it's all quote unquote real estate, right? And like, I think that's where, it's easy to get kind of distracted and not have a good trajectory and track record if you would, agree. But, that's what you've done, right? It's all multifamily.
I agree 100% with what you said. It's funny, my brother-in-law, he gets a lot of these deals and he was like, he'd ask me or my brother would send me, what do you think of this? And I'd say, well, I don't like it for this and these reasons, but I do like it for this reason. You should do this or you should do that. And one time my brother-in-law, and this is right as the GP stuff was happening, he's like, why aren't you a GP? Like, you know all this stuff on the back of your hand because you've been doing it so long. Just take the leap. And I was like, this is somebody outside saying, why are you not moving forward? So I think what you're saying, a basis of knowledge, especially if you can do it in one particular area, gives you confidence to now you can move forward and expand your sphere.
I mean, one of the things that I see all the time and kind of a lot of the other podcasts is like, just underwrite. Just learn how to underwrite deals, right? You may not be actively pursuing one, but you could literally go on, MLS or on LoopNet, CoStar, just find a deal and just underwrite it and start to kind of understand all the moving parts. The more you do, the better you'll do it. And there's a bazillion like YouTube channels and videos on how to do that. So, it's easy to find information on how to analyze, right? And I think that's one piece that's always missing is like just the underwriting functionality and just understanding how all the numbers move and what's involved and conservative outlooks, right? And like stretch it on both ends. Best case scenario, worst case scenario, like you said. So this has been great, man. Anything else we should know about your deal? What's the end game? Where are we going with this?
The end game
is $1 billion?
This is a
$5 billion?
No, this is a new thing for me. It's exciting. Like, in life, I think when you focus on creativity, on building new things, that's when you're happy as a human being. And so it's actually brought a lot of excitement into my life. So I actually don't know where it's going to go from here. We'll see how this goes. We have a lot of friends and family investing in this. So I have a real strong personal goal to make sure that we exceed all expectations. We've under-promised. I really want to over-deliver. And then depending how that goes, one of the sponsors in the deal is kind of a zealot. Like, he feels like, oh my God. And the main sponsor, he's done several deals and returned a lot of money to his friends and family. And he's like, we need to get out there and tell everyone about this asset class. It does so well.
Right.
Everyone is wasting money in their 401ks or this, that, especially with the stock market crash. He's like, we need to educate as many people as possible. And I want to have that zealousness because he feels so strongly in his product, in their process, that he wants to tell the world about it. And and when I saw his excitement, I was like, I would like to do that as well. Like if I could deliver that to my friends and family, that would make me as equally happy as retirement or these other things.
What a wonderful feeling, right? You're so not only kind of giving back to your own tight sphere of family and friends, but you're also kind of winning together, right? I mean, that's kind of what it's all about, especially at the sponsor operator level, right? And that's, and then you build your track record from there, right? So this has been great, dude. I appreciate you taking the time. Excited to see this deal in action and what comes of it. We'll definitely have to do a follow-up, right? Once kind of you're rocking and rolling, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. And if anybody wants to get a hold of me, my name is Laji, and you can contact me at legacyjoint.com, legacyjoint.com. Our company is Legacy Joint Capital. Somebody who's much easier on the eyes and friendlier to talk to is my wife, which is Liz at legacyjoint.com as well.
Awesome.
Thank
we'll
you,
make sure we share all that in the show notes too.
All right.
Awesome, brother.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was great.